A guest who doesn't respect the rules? Come and find out why. Jesus has been engaging with the crowds in the open air, but now an unexpected invitation comes. A Pharisee, a member of the religious group especially hostile to Jesus, invites him for a meal at his house. It seems that Jesus was always ready to accept invitations. He was always ready to share his life with others. Jesus' love extended even to his opponents. Not that any of this meant that Jesus altered his views according to his company. In fact, there's an element of theatre in what follows on this occasion. Jesus comes into the Pharisee's home and he takes his place at the table. But, shock, horror, he does this without ceremonially washing his hands. Luke doesn't tell us exactly what happened next. Perhaps there's open criticism. Perhaps there are whispers of disapproval. Perhaps they're just looks of disbelief. Jesus knows he's being judged. Indeed, the very reason he refused to wash his hands is because he knew it would provoke this response. Jesus is trying to bring down the Pharisees' way of thinking from the inside. Here's what's going on. Years before, Jewish rabbis had decided that washings were necessary to remove ceremonial uncleanness. These washings, they said, freed devout Jews from the ritual uncleanness they might have picked up by brushing against ceremonially unclean people or things. There's probably a particular expectation that Jesus would wash his hands because, well, these religious leaders knew where Jesus had been. They knew that Jesus loved hanging out with people who needed healing of diseases. They knew he appreciated the company of those normally considered unclean because of the lives they'd lived. They knew where Jesus' hands had been, and so they expected him to wash them. And for the sake of a quiet life, Jesus could have gone along with the tradition. But Jesus knows that the Pharisees' emphasis on hand washing reveals a deep problem. Listen to his words. Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. What's the problem? The Pharisees are focusing on external things, on washings, on behavior, but their hearts are untouched. What's the point of washing the outside of a cup or bowl, asked Jesus, if the inside is filthy? No one would appreciate that in a restaurant or even in a student kitchen. To wash just the outside of a cup shows that its owner is more concerned with things seeming clean than actually being clean. Jesus continues, "You foolish people, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But now as for what is inside you, be generous to the poor and everything will be clean for you." There's no use occupying yourself with externals and appearances, says Jesus, if what is inside is rotten and selfish. He gives a further example. You tithe mint and rue and every herb and neglect justice and the love of God. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. The Old Testament law required that farmers tithe or give away 1/10 of the produce of their land. The Pharisees had extended this law. They tithed not just the produce of their fields, but gave away 10% of even the tiniest herbs. Jesus' point is this. These religious people are full of scruples when it comes to tiny matters not explicitly required by God, yet they are totally unmoved by far more important things that God has explicitly required of them, the love for God and justice for the oppressed. It's as if the Pharisees are are carefully tithing their ketchup but keeping the whole burger for themselves. So Jesus asked them, do you really think God is pleased with your careful rule keeping when you are in fact ignoring the most important things? Do you really think that these little acts of so-called obedience can mask the much bigger disobedience inside? Did they? Do we? A religion that only deals with what we look like on the outside can be appealing to us. We think, I can do that. We like to think we can determine our own destiny. But here is Jesus' point. You can never change yourself or anyone else on the inside through effort alone. Jesus' criticism of these religious leaders is fierce because he loves them. He knows that their focus on behavior is deceiving them into thinking they can paper over the cracks. Things might look fine to the casual observer, but underneath, things are a mess. Jesus is much more concerned with how things are than how they seem. It's possible to hear Jesus' teaching and think, okay, I'll try not to get too obsessed with the little details. I'll devote my efforts to obeying in the most important areas instead. Love for God, doing justice. This misses the point. Whatever we do on the outside cannot change us on the inside. You can never love God enough by sheer effort. You can never be committed enough to justice for the vulnerable simply by your own exertion. All you can do is clean the outside of the cup. You're trapped, permanently unclean inside. But that is why Jesus came. As he died in our place, Jesus secured our forgiveness. Everything unclean is washed away, even the unseen things inside us. We didn't earn it, we couldn't achieve it, but Jesus freely washes us. In other words, Jesus hasn't come to give us instructions for cleaning ourselves up. He comes to give us a fresh beginning. We can tinker with our outward behavior. We might even impress other people. We can do really good things. But only Jesus can make us clean on the inside and change us from the inside out. We are set free from simply trying hard to look good and impress others. Instead, we are invited into a relationship that touches every area of life and which forms in us a heartfelt commitment to justice and love for God. That's what Jesus was offering the Pharisees. And that's what he offers you. And that's surely not something we can keep only to ourselves.